They taught you the Middle Ages were 1,000 years without a bath, greasy hair, dirty clothes, streets like sewers. Wrong. So wrong. Beneath that myth is hot water, herbal steam, and a cry every morning. The baths are hot. If you've ever heard medieval people feared water, hold that thought for 10 more seconds while I rip it from your mind. Because right now, the warm wooden tubs and the secrets too inconvenient for textbooks are about to open. Don't look away. By the end, you'll see what we lost wasn't soap, but an intimacy our modern world is starving for. The filthy Middle Ages painting wasn't made by medieval people. It was repainted centuries later, when religious reformers needed a corrupt past to contrast with their clean present, when Enlightenment philosophers needed a dark age to oppose their reason, and when the morally obsessed Victorians wanted to turn the steam behind the bathhouse door into a symbol of sin. They built a distorted mirror. This act of historical slander was a tool for self-justification, a way for new eras to prove their own superiority by creating a primitive other. In the flat glass of contemporary documents, what do you see? Monasteries with regulated bath days and hired attendants, cities with public bathhouses that had operating hours, taxes, and safety inspections. Palaces? The bathtub followed the king like a second throne. This wasn't an occasional luxury. It was documented, regulated infrastructure. You think this sounds embellished? Stay calm. We'll soon get to the backbone. Regulations, numbers, locations, and even the names of those who signed the closure orders. The evidence isn't just in poems, but in dry, practical administrative records. But first, to understand why they bathed, you have to understand it wasn't just about getting clean, it was medicine. This wasn't just a luxury, it was a core part of their worldview. To understand the medieval bath, you must first forget our modern ideas of germs and enter their world of balance. First, let's be blunt. For medieval people, bathing was health. Medicine at the time was based on the humoral theory, 4 fluids in the body that needed to balance: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. One imbalance, and you were sick. And one of the ways to rebalance was water. Hot water to open the skin, cool water to lower heat, steam to clear the organs, and herbs to draw melancholy from the mind. This was personalized medicine, where the bathhouse was the pharmacy. Physicians wrote entire guides on soaking according to the season or condition. Warm baths with rosemary for poor digestion, mint for fatigue, lukewarm water after childbirth, soaking the feet every night for insomnia. Not everyone had a tub, but even the poor kept a basin ready to wash hands before meals, the face in the morning, and the feet before sleep. These weren't old wives' tales. They were formal medical prescriptions. The specific blend of herbs and the precise temperature were prescribed to treat the individual's imbalance, making the bath a deeply deliberate medical act. You didn't just take a bath, you undertook a personalized therapeutic treatment. This medical social need played out differently behind the walls of the monastery and the palace. Here, the same act of soaking in hot water split into 2 very different streams of purpose. On one side, it was a battle for the soul. On the other, it was a performance of earthly power. Inside the monastery, the rules of asceticism were wary of bodily pleasure, so bathing was strictly regulated. But the records show very human exceptions. The sick, the elderly, and travelers bathed more. Some abbeys had heated rooms and lead pipes channeling water to stone basins. In the royal court, this care became a performance of power. Kings traveled with their tubs. Palaces had hot and cold running water. An emperor bathing with his barons was conducting politics in steam. In the monastery, the bath was a concession to humanity. In the palace, it was an extension of authority. This contrast shows how the same act could be interpreted as either a spiritual weakness or a political strength. Yet, in both, the bathhouse was a great equalizer, stripping the monk of his robes and the king of his crown, revealing the fragile body beneath all the ceremony. This shared vulnerability was a powerful, unspoken truth, whether surrounded by incense in a palace or by silent prayer in a cloister. But bathing wasn't just for the elite. The real heartbeat of this culture was found in the public street. While the powerful and the pious had their private rituals, the true story of bathing was written by the masses. The revolution wasn't happening in stone basins, but in the noisy, steaming wooden tubs of the common people. Leaving the palace, the public bathhouse appears as a communal living room for the city. In several large cities, tax ledgers and licensing records note dozens of baths scattered across the map. In areas like Southwark, across the river from London, records list a dozen spots with hot tubs, regulated hours, and fees. Early in the morning, attendants would cry out, "The baths are hot!" to summon customers. All classes came, craftsmen after a shift, widows seeking warmth, the elderly with aching backs, kids wanting to splash. The bathhouse didn't just sell water, it sold services, shaves, haircuts, massage, light meals, and warm wine. It was a truly democratic space in a deeply hierarchical world. In a world with no central heating and where labor was backbreaking, this was a vital piece of urban infrastructure, as necessary as the baker or the blacksmith. It wasn't just comfort, it was a matter of public health and social cohesion. This communal space naturally became a theater of intimacy, where the lines were as blurry as the steam. This was where the social fabric was woven, but it wasn't just a local phenomenon. This appreciation for water and warmth crossed borders, creating a vast, interconnected map of bathing cultures. In those tubs, there was romance and socializing, husbands and wives soaked together, dimming the lights. The middle class, rarely touching luxury, could have an hour of equality in a shared tub. The wealthy continued political discussions without their armor, sometimes with food and wine served on floating planks. This wasn't just a Western European trend either. To say medieval people and mean only Parisians or Londoners is a massive error. The medieval picture is diverse. In Islamic-influenced Iberia, the hammam was standard urban culture. Jewish communities had the mikveh for ritual purification. In the north, they had the sauna. In Slavic lands, the banya. To ignore this diversity is to fall for the same trap of oversimplification as the Victorians. Water was a cultural language spoken in hundreds of different dialects. Each tradition adapted the universal need for warmth and cleansing to its own unique climate and theology. We must be clear, not everyone bathed the same way. Fuel was expensive, wood was strictly managed. The rich had servants to haul water and infuse herbs. The poor used basins, buckets, and rivers. But even these small acts created a daily rhythm of clean that the 1,000 years without a bath myth deliberately ignores. This inequality led to the thorny part, sex. In some areas, especially outside the centers of power, bathhouses, the stews, merged with brothels. The authorities knew. They regulated, taxed, and set hours. These stews were a moral gray zone, officially condemned but practically tolerated. This was a world of harsh trade-offs, where women could find a sliver of economic power, but only by renting the very bodies they had come to cleanse, making them targets for both disease and moral condemnation. This is the uncomfortable truth that is often left out of the romanticized histories. In the mid-14th century, the Black Death swept Europe. No one understood germs. What they knew was the stench in the air miasma. The prevailing theory was that opening the pores with hot water would suck this bad air into the body. People closed public gathering places. The bathhouse, cramped, humid, crowded, suddenly became an image of risk. It's crucial to understand their logic. In a world without germ theory, air was the enemy. Hot, steamy, enclosed rooms filled with the breath of dozens of people seemed like the most logical place on earth for this poisoned air to spread. In their framework, the bathhouse was the perfect vector for a disease carried on the air. That spark came in the late 15th century, syphilis. A new, painful, disfiguring disease was easily blamed on places associated with pleasure and nakedness. This new, terrifying illness seemed to be a divine punishment for the very pleasures the bathhouse offered. Across Europe, the baths were shut down, licenses were revoked, bans were issued. In the mid-16th century, the infamous stews of London were closed by royal decree. Just before that, the humanist Erasmus lamented that only a generation ago, baths were everywhere. Today, they are gone. The cries of, "The baths are hot," faded into silence. The collapse wasn't just moral or medical, it was economic. Wood was expensive. Water for swelling cities was a headache. When the profits dried up and the risks increased, there was no incentive to maintain these complex facilities. In less than 2 generations, a central pillar of social life was dismantled. The skills, the infrastructure, and the habit of public bathing were lost, and the convenient lie, "we are cleaner than they were," rushed in to fill the vacuum. The physical structures decayed, and the collective memory of this social custom was deliberately erased. The fair answer is, medieval people weren't sparkling clean, but they didn't hate water. They were practical. They regulated hand washing before meals and foot washing at night. They soaked when possible and washed seasonally, differing by region, wallet, and religion. History is messy, not a studio photograph. This is the most profound difference. For them, cleanliness was not just physical, it was moral and spiritual. A dirty body was a sign of a disordered soul. Our modern obsession with being germ-free would have seemed just as strange to them as their herbal baths seem to us. They were washing away sin and disorder, not just bacteria. Therefore, a king washing before Easter and a peasant washing hands before bread were partaking in the same act of restoring order to their world. Are you still there? Because this last part is what most people miss. This is where the past stops being a history lesson and starts being a mirror. What they lost wasn't just hot water, it was a form of human connection we are still trying to get back. We didn't just lose the bathhouses, we lost the habit of bathing together. You see it survive in the Finnish sauna, the Japanese sento, and the Moroccan hammam. When the bathroom moved into the private home, we became cleaner by microbiological standards, but lonelier by human standards. We engineered the most efficient, private, and sterile bathing systems in human history, but we did it at the cost of community. We optimized for hygiene and privacy, but we forgot the human element. And that's the final twist. This history doesn't just ask, were they dirty? It asks us, showering alone under stainless steel, what did we lose? It forces us to question whether our definition of clean is the only one that matters. The story of the medieval bath isn't over. It's an echo we still hear today. If you're ready to listen to more of these echoes, to challenge the history you were taught, and to see how the past soaks into the present, your journey starts now. If this journey through medieval baths moved you, and you want to keep pulling the plug on historical myths, subscribe for more forgotten truths whispered in steam and stone. Click the bell icon so you never miss our next investigation. And now, tell us in the comments, what modern ritual gives you the sense of community that the bathhouse once did? Or just comment hot water if you made it to the end and will never see the Middle Ages the same way again. We'll see you in the next one.